At this point, we're ready to start learning how to use Git to track changes in a project. The first step is to make what's called a commit. In order to let Git start tracking changes, we have to have at least one file or directory. So we'll follow the common practice of using the Unix touch command to create an empty file just to get us started. In this case, because we're making a small website as our example application, we'll follow the near universal convention by calling the main page of our site index.html. We can see the result of that with ls-l, the long form of ls, and you can see here 0 indicates that it's empty, but it has the right name. To see the effect of this as far as Git is concerned, we'll use the status command. Remember, we type Git first before typing the particular Git command, so in this case status. And this is the result. You can see here at the top, it says on branch master. Again, we'll be talking more about branches later in this tutorial. Git knows that it's the initial commit, and then it lists as untracked this file index.html that we just touched. Git even tells us how to get going. It says nothing added to commit. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. But untracked files present use git add to track. This is the first stage in the standard Git status sequence for a changing file. Let's take a look at a diagram of that. We'll be talking about all of these stages throughout this tutorial, but right now we're starting with untracked and unstaged, and we're going to use the git add command to stage the change to be committed to the local repository. We'll see by example what each of these terms means. So let's go back to our terminal window. And we'll follow Git's advice by using git add to add the change. Now we could actually do this. We can do index.html. We could just add the particular file. But it's usually the case that you want to add all of the files and directories. And the way to do that is with the -A flag like this. By the way, you can also do this, git add dot. Recall that dot is the way you indicate the current directory in Unix. This is also common, but the native Git way to do it is with git add -a. This stages all of the changes, so let's run git status again. And now we see changes to be committed, new file index.html. At this point, the change has been staged, which means that when we run git commit, like this, Git will record the change for future reference. The usual way to use git commit involves putting a message using the -m flag right down the command line, although there's another way to do this we'll talk about later in this tutorial. And in this case, I'll give it the message initialize repository. It's completely unimportant what these details are. Don't worry about them, really ever, certainly not in this tutorial. There is one thing I'd like to draw your attention to though, which is the convention in terms of the language of this commit. I follow a convention recommended by the GitHub website, which is also consistent with the usage of Git itself, which is to write commit messages in terms of the present tense. So instead of saying initialized repository, we say initialize repository, and also write it as a command. Technically speaking, the imperative mood. So instead of saying initializes repository, we say initialize repository. Conventions differ though, and in practice, people are rarely consistent on these sorts of commits. As much as it pains me to admit it, it probably doesn't matter that much. But for consistency, I will be adhering to this convention throughout the rest of this tutorial. At this point, the addition of the index.html file has been recorded in our local repository. Let's see what that means by running the git log command. So you can see here that Git has a log of the change that we made, labeled with the message that we included on the command line, together with the author, email address, and date. It's also worth looking at this here. This is a unique identifier for this commit. Among other things, that means that your value will certainly differ. The technical name for this object is a hash, also often called a SHA, because of the acronym for the particular algorithm, the secure hash algorithm used to generate it. Many Git operations involve using this SHA, and we'll see one example later in this tutorial.